The last 12 months have been really interesting for PDA. We've had the National Autistic Society basically stating that they don't think PDA exists. Only 30% of the nation still recognise PDA. The other 70% won't diagnose PDA. This isn't cool. What needs to be understood and what needs to be known is more about PDA and how it affects our kids, how it affects PDAers themselves, both adults and youngsters. In that vein, the PDA Space Summit has been running for about 5 years now. It's a fantastic event that basically goes into detail, actually talking to real PDAers, talking to people who are carers or adjacent to PDA, to really get to the nub of how we can better support and make this world a suitable place for PDAers. I have with me the organizer and the founder of the PDA Space, Nicola Reekie. Nicola, how are you today?
I'm really good. Thank you, Duncan, and thank you for your time. And yes, it's the 5th Summit, 26th of April.
Nicola, I want to ask, the PDA Space Summit, what was the gestation for this for you? Why did you start it?
It was very organic, and I was meant to host the first PDA conference in Wales, in Cardiff. And this was back in April 2020. We all know what happened. By chance, a colleague that somebody I knew who was very technically minded. So we met and said, "You're really techie." And we put the first summit on July 2020, which was literally in a pop-up Facebook group, which at the time it was starting to happen. We got 24 webinars, and we created the first summit. Since then, in 2021, I created the PDA Space. It's, continued to evolve.
And it is really brilliant. One of the things I really appreciate is that, and I say this as somebody who is adjacent myself, the bulk of people involved with the PDA Space Summit are themselves PDAers, or at least neurodivergent in one way or another. So can speak from inside the box, if you like. Is that deliberate, or was that something that, again, organically happened?
It's organically happened. When I was focusing on the first conference, yeah, absolutely. I'd met and spoken with Juila Daunt, and I'd had conversations with Sally Catt, who felt very passionate about their voices needing to be heard and their insight to be shared. When I went and listened to both Sally Catt and Juila Daunt in Bristol, I was like, oh gosh, they shared so much info. The one thing that really got me was, I remember weeks later thinking, is that nugget Julia said? If only I'd been able to record it. And there were a few bits and pieces through that day, which is why I created the Back Pocket Pass, because all of that info in your back pocket, at the end of the day, as family members or professionals, there's only so much information we can all hold. I also find that there's certain things that I can hear something or read something once, and then I listen to something again and I'm like, I didn't hear that nugget.
Because you're right. I mean, there's so much. I find it with great examples like movies and stuff, particularly the sort of more detailed movies, or you can go back and rewatch them and pick up bits and pieces that you hadn't done before and think, oh wow, that's really clever. Like The Matrix was one that you could go back and watch over and over and still pull out different bits and pieces. It was so cleverly done. I think it's the same with these kind of seminars. There's so much information, and you can get information overload. 3 days worth of conference information is a lot to take on. So being able to go back and dip into it is so important. What's your relationship with PDA?
Both my boys have got a diagnosis of PDA, Pathological Demand Avoidance. That was really what inspired me initially. Was when my eldest got his diagnosis, I felt that there was such little knowledge and information in southwest of Wales, or probably the entire of Wales. And I'd done a talk locally and realised that we really needed more support. So for me, through my youngest, I'm really unpicking my own neuro understanding. I was very late diagnosed dyslexic dyspraxic after my 20s. But I've now since had a screening to say, yes, you are ADHD and autistic. And I do have a lot of different avoidant challenges, but I don't, at this moment, identify with PDA.
That's my relationship in a way as well. Obviously, my daughter's a PDA, and so there's that element there. But we've seen also my son's recently been diagnosed ADHD. My wife's neurodivergent. I think we're starting to see PDA more and more clearly. My experience has been that PDA is considered to be a rare profile within the autism spectrum, but the reality is I see it popping up more and more and more as understanding's developing, a lot like ADHD, where 20, 30 years ago, it was very, very rarely diagnosed and really misunderstood in so many ways. And yet we're starting to see it come more and more into public knowledge and acceptance and understanding, and the support that's available for it is so much better. I think things like the PDA Space Summit really sum up that need for understanding and education on it. And I think it's a really good thing.
Thank you. And there is more and more research being done. So I know that one of our speakers, Claire Truman from Spectrum Space, is doing research on education that is supportive to PDAers. There was another one recently put out by some of the community. There's a lot of research being done to support and look deeper at PDA. And I just realised that when you asked me the question about speakers, are they PDA? And I did a bit of a political answer and talked about other bits. I felt it was really important because actually the people I've gained the most knowledge from are adult PDAers. This year, 95% of the speakers are neurodivergent themselves.
It's one of those things that I come back to a lot because obviously I do what I do, but I really see my role as almost acting as a megaphone, if you like, for the neurodivergent voice, because I'm neurotypical. I try and make sure I have a lot of interviews and stuff like that. So I'm not talking over a community, but I'm talking with the community and hopefully being a conduit between neurotypicals and neurodivergent people. So to see it reflected in that with 95% of speakers being neurodivergent, I think that's brilliant. One thing you have happening this year, which I was really, really happy to see, is you've got a focus on the male voice as well as the voice of dads and male PDAs. How did that come about?
Over the years, I've often heard everybody saying, oh, if only I could get my partner, my husband, my dad to listen. And I joked last year or the year before because my husband used to do the editing of all the webinars. And I said, well, perhaps I ought to put that out as a job, and realise that actually we need to have Dad's Corner. So every day this year, there is a webinar by dads like yourself, to dads or the male community, and however they identify within the PDA community. Because I think the language can be different, needs to be different. You know, that I grew up with the book, Women Are...
Men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
Let's create that support. And all of those webinars, they need to be under 25 minutes. And this is a massive generalization, but often it needs to be short, it needs to be clear, it needs to be bite-sized.
I'll back that up. I have mentioned this a number of times in talks on this channel and things that I've done, that I think you have to speak in generalizations to a degree, because you've got to take in the sort of the populace, if you like, on that front. And if we're going to reach guys like myself, then there's a certain way to do that. That's an understanding that that's a generalization. It's not endorsing a stereotype.
But it's also giving male community a voice, which I think I find really interesting, that in many other industries or areas, that actually it's normally the females that don't have a platform and don't have a voice. But in this community, there seems to be more females. And I find that really interesting. And in a local event in Cardiff, I had a dad come and talk to me because he heard me speak. He shared some information and how I'd helped him turn some things around. It was about, telling his child to go and tidy his room. And he said, actually, you've given me some really good ideas of going with them and looking and working together. And I think it is vital. And I'm really pleased that we've got Ian from Australia, because they've created a dad's Facebook group, support group, which is vital.
I think it is. And I think men process this, again, talking in a generalization, but we process this stuff in such a different way. I think it takes a different approach for us to get to the point where we can start to understand, like, my talk on the summit is actually around this. That's sort of how I process it and how it came to me, that I sort of went through different stages to come to the point where I was not only accepting, but obviously became an advocate and somebody who wanted to see this better understood and better supported. It takes those few men who are prepared to be a bit vulnerable and open up, I think, to say that sort of stuff. So the selection of male speakers that are on this is fantastic. But of course, with so many different perspectives that are taken into account on this, that's one thing I've always appreciated about the PDA Space Summit in previous years. There's a huge diversity of voices to be heard, whether being neurotypical, neurodivert, however they identify in their sexuality or their gender, all that sort of stuff is represented within the summit. And I think that's a really important factor as well.
Yeah, and I may not have that big glossy look around me, unlike some organisations and companies. And most people are quite surprised when they realise that I'm a solo entrepreneur with minimal support. However, bringing different voices together within the PDA community, I feel is really important.
Yeah.
There isn't just one voice. I'm really mindful that in life, for one person, they might be like, wow, that person is really, I love everything they say. For another person, it's Marmite. And it needs to be a collection. And it also needs to be a collection of different opinions and views. So this year's theme being looking beyond behaviour. We have a lot of former teachers, a lot of people who mentor and work with young people. And I know that one particular speaker said, but Nick, I'm a bit concerned that I'm going to be saying info similar to someone else. And I said, but even if everybody spoke about exactly the same topic, it won't be the same, because we've all got our different way of sharing information. That's the other thing that I would like to say. When we contact speakers, I really want it to be as supportive for the speaker as well as the viewer. Yeah. So we've got some like this that is purely a chat, like myself. Mine is just talking to camera. We've got other people who've done amazing PowerPoints. I've supported speakers who have used a PowerPoint and needed someone to talk with. And we've got the guys in Australia, they did it together. So it's about that flavour, that whatever your learning style or whatever way you find best, there is all the webinars have a different way of being shown. I'm really passionate about accessibility, which is why it will never be charged over the weekend of the summit. It's always going to be free, and each day has a different set of webinars. But to have the access to the back pocket pass, which is all the webinars, is that there's an additional charge for the CPD, which will include all the transcripts. And I appreciate some people will say that's not very accessible. However, the time, the energy, the work that's gone on to create that is important.
I'll back you up on that. I think there needs to be an understanding that all this takes not only time, but there's a cost in technology, there's a cost in so many different things. I think, like you, I have a very strong belief that this sort of educational style should be accessible and free for whatever. The fact that you're doing it over that weekend for free, that people can just tune in. I don't think it's expensive to get the back pocket pass, and that's an advantage that you can have. And the fact that you can revisit it over a year and still keep learning from it. I think, you think what you'd spend to go on an education course in general, it would be much more expensive. And the same for even a conference. The tickets are often hundreds of pounds. So I think it's, before people judge that there's a cost to some elements of it, I think that it's important to remember that actually this has been done in a really generous way, in that as much as possible, things are free to access.
Thank you. And it's accessible in two places. A Facebook group, where we've got over 6,000 members, but also the website. And my website's on a Kajabi platform, which means that if you sign up to Kajabi's app, and I am that person who really dislikes when everyone goes, oh, you need the app. However, you don't need the app, but a bit like audiobooks, you can just jump in, listen to them or watch them, depending on your learning styles. And just because we're talking about the costs, till the last day of the summit, it's only £49 to purchase the back pocket pass, £55 if you want the CPD and transcripts. And we've got an element where charities, organisations can buy a pack and it's less. And then it goes to £99 from the 30th of April.
It is, I think, fantastically accessible being online and the different formats that are online. It means that you don't have to worry about accessibility as far as, getting wheelchair users through the doors or, all that kind of stuff. The fact that anyone can just tune in, and we are all pretty tech savvy these days, I think. So, and I'm sure that there'll be support for anybody who's having trouble. So please, when is the summit? What's the dates?
Friday, the 26th of April. It goes on till Monday morning till 10 o'clock. So every lot of webinars go live. So they start Friday at 10 o'clock British summer time, and they're available for 24 hours. That day's worth of webinars will go and be accessible from 10 o'clock in the morning. And I just would like to put in this caveat that anyone who purchased the back pocket pass, we do make this clear, do not go live till the Monday.
I've always enjoyed the summit and I'm really proud to be part of it this year. We will put links in the description for signing up. Otherwise, you can use the QR code that's going to pop up here right now, or you can click in the link that should pop up as well. Please do check it out. Like, as we said, it's free for the weekend it runs. For the 3 days it's running, it's completely free. It is well worth having a look through the agenda and the timetable to see what's on and what might suit your particular interests or needs or for support in this. So please do go check it out. Nicola, I want to thank you for joining me, and thank you again for putting this on. I think it's so important.
Thank you for bringing me in and talking about it. So thank you.
I will see you again on the next episode. In the meantime, please do stay safe.